Afternoon punters, huge weekend of racing and sport. Well done to all the Tigers fans. Nothing like seeing emotions spilling over from a bunch of people that probably didn't expect much at the start of the season. So good on all those Tigers fans. They've got a memory that'll last them a lifetime, no doubt, including the great Adam Blanco. So really happy for Adam and people like him. With all the racing on the weekend, punters, lots of review work to do, hard to catch up, heaps to be done, and that means that here I am flying solo this week. So the first point to make is that if I make a hash of this and no one watches, Ralphie and DK will probably be delighted. So let's hope I can make it a little bit entertaining for you and people get through to the end of the episode. So with no official guest, I'd say that the guest on today's show, I've made you the viewers. So I've had a lot of questions come in, some that we've addressed on the show previously, some that we haven't had a chance to have a look at. So some of those ones that we haven't had a chance to have a look at, I've sort of just put them down in bullet form just to use them as points to discuss. So first of all, something that caught my eye, leading this week, or whenever the Everest is in 2 weeks' time. It's all the go, particularly up north. That's all everyone's talking about. So as most of you know, I'm not on Twitter, but occasionally I get on there and just have a bit of a read around and see what people are talking about and that sort of thing. And I come across a few weeks back a chain of Twitter conversation about a mock market that the TAB had put up. So they got the ball rolling there and sort of created a market if you took all the great sprinters of the past several decades. And they had Vane and Hariba, Black Caviar, of course, and some of the current ones and so forth. And they had a market there and had all the typical tweets, because they'd put Black Caviar up at about a $6 favourite, and people saying $6 should be $1.60, and others saying I won the win 3 the place of Reba, and other older viewers looking at it saying no, you'd never beat Vane in a sprint race, and so on and so forth. There was all that sort of stuff, and I'm reading down and going, yeah, that makes it all a little bit interesting. But then I come across a tweet from one of our crowd, one of our viewers, good man Cayenne, and Cayenne's tweet was, even in a mock market, the TAB put up 126%. Now that one had me falling about on the ground laughing. Just outstanding work, Cayenne. And if you keep up that sort of work, mate, you'll first of all, you'll have to be a special guest on the show at some point. And second of all, if you can keep it up for long enough, we might have to make you a life member, mate. That was outstanding work. So good work there to Cayenne. One of our regular emailers is Ray. He emailed me this morning just asking me if I thought, he seemed to think from what he looked at that it was the firmest Caulfield's been in a long while. I don't know if that's quite right. I think it did firm up during the day, but the times, they're just genuine good 3 times. There was no wind there yesterday, so the track sort of did dry out as the day went on, but I think it raced pretty well. Caulfield's it's just not quite in as good an order as Flemington is. Now, that's not a knock on Caulfield. That's just to say that, these tracks, they all go through cycles, and for whatever reason, Flemington has just lined up perfectly this year. It's just in 100% A1 order, where it's Caulfield's, probably 95%. And there's still we're only just come out of winter, so Caulfield will continue to improve, and it's racing well. There's nothing wrong with the way Caulfield's racing. So, I think that not a lot of horses could blame the track for their runs yesterday. Of course, tempo had a big part in it, and your positioning run relative to the tempo was a pretty significant factor there at Caulfield yesterday. But I think it raced pretty much how I expected after I walked it on Saturday. Ray also asked about Moonee Valley and why would they have chosen to put the rail out 4. The track staff have answered that question themselves on social media and in the mainstream media. I think they had legitimate reasons for placing the rail in that position. Now, It was on pace advantage there on Friday night, but I think it was significantly exaggerated because the right horses just got into the right spots. So if there is a bit of an advantage and then the right horses occupy them, they're obviously going to be incredibly hard to beat. So I think if you had the best horses in some of those races, taking up different positions, not the most advantaged position, it would have looked different because they may still have been able to win, like She Will Reign was able to. Obviously, that was tempo assisted, but there were a lot of good run-on performances at Moonee Valley on Friday night by horses well out of the market. So, yes, there was an on-pace advantage, no doubt about it. Was lane 1 a huge advantage? I don't think it was. It just happened to be that a lot of the right horses happened to find lane 1. And lanes 2, 3, 4 and 5 were all legitimate. They were feasible lanes to win from, and the only reason they didn't post more wins in some of those other lanes is because the right horses didn't get to them. So anyway, that's my view on Moonee Valley, and I don't think it was a huge issue having the rail at 4 metres. It's just that at night, and one of the track guys out there, Sam Tankard, made a really good point to me when I was talking to him out there on Thursday, that this time of year, with them starting at 6:30, that was, Friday was prior to daylight saving. It was pretty much dark by race 1, and they're racing in the dark all night. And for whatever reason, the horses seem to not make as much ground and are not happy to run past each other when they're racing in the dark under lights. Whereas when we get right into the teeth of summer at Moonee Valley, it's the lights aren't actually fully taking over. It's not dark until after 9 o'clock. So it just changes the circumstances there a little bit, whether they're actually racing there in the daylight or completely under lights. So I think that's a point that's relevant as well. And the time of the year there had a factor on Friday night. Another emailer that wrote in was Matthew. He was just asking about Foundation, and has Foundation now spent the advantages that he gained for himself from the August 26 race at Moonee Valley, where he led and gave a very good side against Almand and Pakadali. Matthew, I think the short answer is yes. He didn't go very good at all there on Friday night. I think the stable has placed him according to the races available to them, and in a perfect world, I think they would have gone up in distance and not stayed at 2,000 metres for the third run in a row. And that's left him now a little bit bereft, and he's going to have to rebuild himself. So he desperately needs a rise in distance. He desperately needs to race at a good natural tempo for him, which probably means he's going to be on pace in a 2,400 metre race. And if he can get into a rhythm, he still has the potential to, win a race over the spring, but he's sort of almost starting again there. So jury's out on Foundation at this stage. Ray that wrote in asking about Caulfield Moonee Valley also, highlighted in a previous email Kementari to me, and I thought it was a good time to talk about Kementari because he ran a reasonably good race there on Sunday, and he's heading towards the Caulfield Guineas. The interesting part about Kementari that Ray raised with me is that he's a familiar type to Lonhro. He has a lot of Lonhro in him, and it's worth remembering that Lonhro went into the Caulfield Guineas as not only not the favourite, but he wasn't even the favourite of his stable. There was a stablemate in that race, I can't remember his name, might have been Viscount or something like that actually ran favourite in the Caulfield Guineas, and Lonhro, I think, went around double figures, and he didn't actually produce his best till he got to 1,600 metres. So I think there's an opportunity for Kementari still. He's got ground to make up, but he's an interesting horse, and Royal Sympathy's now had the gloss knocked off him. He certainly can bounce back in the Caulfield Guineas Royal Sympathy, so it'll be a very interesting race, and I think a lot will depend on how that race maps and what the likely tempo is and where they are in relation to each other, those horses, because there's probably not a lot between the key chances heading towards the Caulfield Guineas, and a lot also depends on which horses come down from Sydney. Another one of my regular correspondents is Brian, and in his most recent email, Brian is delighted with how things are chugging along with the Potts Play service. So am I. I think I've got some work to do with the full sets. They've been solid. They were really good in August. They were solid in September, but improvement to be made there. But the Potts Play is going along beautifully. And in his most recent email, Brian asked me about a couple of horses, Pinot and Temple of Bell. So first of all, they're both lightly raced. Pinot's a run ahead of Temple of Bell in their where they are in their form cycle. Pinot's run at Bendigo, I backed Pinot at Bendigo to beat Anchor Bid, and she just come up about half a length short there, but then was able to reverse that at Flemington. I've got Pinot's second place to Anchor Bid at Bendigo, very close to what Temple of Bell produced there at Bendigo, winning her maiden last week. So, you know, Pinot has come off that and improved about 3 lengths, which is a pretty big jump, and Temple of Bell would have to do something similar to if she was going to challenge Pinot down the track in any of the fillies races. But they're both interesting horses. They've both got an opportunity over the spring. So 2 horses well spotted by Brian there. And I just want to add one into the mix for the punters there. There was a horse having his second run at Benalla on Friday, and I just want to say about that Benalla meeting on Friday, it raced very quick, and I think there will be several Saturday winners that could come out of that Benalla meeting. One of them is a horse called Villamont, who's trained by Kieran Marwell, will now be moving to the new trainer, who's Aaron Purcell, of course. So they'll be very interested to see how the market reacts to the stable change there. But Villamont, having his second start at Benalla, it's hard not to put a very big figure beside his name, and he is a horse with an opportunity over the spring to come to town and win a significant race, I would think. And a lot of people that write in have asked me about books and that sort of thing, and here's one of the ones that I've mentioned a few times. You know, it's back to front there, but I can promise you it's Beating the Odds, written by Nicola Garvey, and it's about Alan Tripp and his journey from the back rooms of various establishments around Melbourne as an SP to Vanuatu, and eventually selling that to Sporting Bet, and then starting Sports Bet with his son Matt and everything else. So it's a really interesting book. There's lots of good punting stories in there. One of the ones I'll just mention that sticks with me, there was a businessman who was a fairly big customer of theirs when they were in Vanuatu, that was in South Australia and bet in a pretty big size, not a regular winner, and all of a sudden his bets sort of changed in nature, and he was winning more regularly, and went along for a couple of months, and they're thinking, what's going on here? This has all changed. And as it turned out, he was bowling for a couple of professional punters and took about $1 million out of the A1 betting shop over that period. So they were sort of trying to work what to do. Then all of a sudden, the nature of the bets started to alter again a little bit, and he had a bad week, and the next week he was really on the chase, and they thought, well, we'll let this run and see what happens. And before they knew it, he was into them for the best part of $1 million. And I think they're the right numbers anyway. It's a while since I read that book. And when they sort of investigated all, they realised that he'd been bowling for a couple of months and thought he had it all sorted out himself and just went on his own. And then when he got in a bit of a hole, he started to chase. So I think it's an interesting story. It's a cautionary tale for punters to never let your ego get in front of yourself, and to be constantly reviewing what you're doing and making sure you're on the right track, and never fall into the traps that those bookmakers are looking to get you to fall into, which, obviously chasing is a big one. And just, it's always dangerous. DK and I often talk about what happens when you get a little bit overconfident, and it's never a good thing. You've always almost got to start again every day and treat every day as a new day. Well, punters, you wouldn't believe it, but we've just got through part 1 there. We've made it to the nearly the 15-minute mark. I hope that was somewhat entertaining, and I'll come back in a moment with a second part. We'll see how we go.